All right. So, hello, everyone. I am Dr. Hightower, and this is our Boren Scholarship presentation. Um, with us today, we have Madelyn Beacham, who is a UNG alumna, as well as a Boren alumni ambassador. So, I'm going to turn it over to her, and she will do all the great things that she does. So, Madelyn, it's good to see you.
Good to see you. And good to see everybody here. I'm so glad that you all came. I think for me, I remember when I was applying, one of the scariest steps, I should say, was just putting myself out there, letting it be known that I was interested, can be vulnerable. So I appreciate you all for coming. That's awesome. So yeah, like Dr. Hightower said, my name is Madeline. I graduated from the University of North Georgia in December of 2019. And I did my Boren program from the summer of 2018 to the end of 2018, like June to December, roughly. And I was studying Arabic in Jordan. And then I came back to North Georgia. I graduated. I then did my master's in Turkey, actually with a Fulbright. I'm not talking about Fulbright today, but just flagging that. I know that deadline just passed, but if that name at all is interesting to you, I'm also free to talk about that in the future. Um, and then I started doing my federal service commitment, which we'll talk about in this presentation, with the Buffalo Passport Agency here in Buffalo, New York in December of 2022. So it has been almost 2 years now. And I really, really love it. It's a great place to work in the State Department, in my unbiased opinion. And yeah, so that's a little bit about me. And then we also have Bailey here today. She's from IIE, the nonprofit that administers this scholarship. And she can talk a little bit about herself. She's also a Georgia girl, not North Georgia, but she's a Georgia girl.
Thank you, Madeline. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Like Madeline said, yes, I went to the University of Georgia, so a little bit more south from you guys, but I did the Portuguese flagship program. Also, as a Boren scholar to Brazil for Portuguese. And then, similar to Madeline, I fulfill my service on the INSEP service team, which are the folks that work with you guys to help find federal employment. And then it all came full circle, and I found myself back here at IIE. So really excited to now be on the front end of the process, and hope to see you guys apply this year. That's back to you, Matt.
Bailey too, is going to be able to kind of fill in any of the gaps that I miss on the more weeds of this that I'm not an expert in. So she'll also be here to clarify and answer any questions. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen so y'all can see my presentation. See if I can do this. It's been a minute. All right, can everybody see the PowerPoint? See if I can get this thing out of the way now. Okay. Okay. Can everybody see that? Okay, perfect. Um, get this a little more. All right, so we're going to be talking about the Boren Awards today, if that has not been clear enough already. Okay, so who is the Boren for? So this scholarship is designed for anybody who is both interested in language study overseas and a career in public services working for the federal government. So if you're at those crossroads, welcome. A little bit more of the eligibility stuff. You have to be a US citizen. You have to be planning to study a foreign language intensively in an eligible world region. Eligible is the keyword there. Boren doesn't send people to Western Europe, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. We're talking about specific places in the world that we'll get into more. You have to be matriculated or enrolled at an accredited U.S. institution, or if you're applying to grad school, as long as you're just enrolled by the time you are starting your program, that's what counts. You have to be a non-citizen of whatever country you're going to. So let's say you're a dual citizen of the US, and I'll use Jordan because that's where I went. You could not go to Jordan to study, but if you wanted to do Arabic, you could study it in another Arabic speaking country. And then you do have to be interested in public service because the stipulation with this scholarship is if you get it, you do have to spend a year working somewhere in the federal government. And so that's what we're talking about when you hear us referring to the service requirement. Um, so you do have to commit to just that 1 year, but we'll talk about more in the application. The goal is to kind of show that you're interested and dedicated to a longer term career in the federal service. All right, so money. Let's talk about this part that I know we're all interested in. So the amount that you get is determined by how long you're there. So the preferred duration of study is a year, and a year, according to Boren, is anything more than 25 weeks to 52 weeks. So if you're there for that amount of time, your ceiling that you can get is $25,000. If you go abroad for 12 to 24 weeks, which is technically like a semester, you can get up to $12,500. And then available just to STEM students is a summer program where you can get $8,000 for that 8 to 11 weeks. And then the same goes for the fellows for the most part. The only difference is that you can get $5,000 to do an intensive summer program before you go abroad. In addition, if you did that 1 year, you could also tack on a summer before that. And I should also say here, I meant to mention in the beginning, the difference between the scholarships and the fellowships is the scholarships is for undergrad students, the fellowships is for grad students. Um, I'm kind of curious because I'm going to talk about a little bit of the differences more in this, and I know that this is being recorded, so this will go to everybody, but I'm curious among who we have here, what's the undergrad grad split? If Dr. Hightower, you know, or
Yeah, they're all everyone's an undergrad, I believe.
okay, perfect. So yeah.
So it's all
Um,
scholarships.
Okay, so we're all scholarships here, but I know this is being recorded, but whatever. I like to know my audience a little bit, so that's good to know. So yeah, everybody here, scholarships is the key word in these slides that differentiate between the two. All right, so what does that money cover? So the thing with Boren is that that money that you just saw, you get as a flat rate that then you're responsible for allocating appropriately to what it covers. So that's going to be your ticket to and from the country, your program tuition, the materials that go with it, insurance, lodging and food, your local transportation, the visa fees, and then also up to $500 for cybersecurity costs. So that's a laptop, burner phone, or VPN if you need that in the country that you're going to. And then not covered, you'll see are kind of those personal um, costs that aren't as directly related to your scholarship, I mean your study abroad program. Um, Included in that, I'll note importantly, because I've heard lots of people have questions on this, that whatever rent that you're paying in the US, what you get from Bourne is not supposed to cover your rent if you were, let's say, going abroad and then you still were having to pay that rent while you were away. And then also with dependents, so I don't know if anybody's married here or has children, you can't take your spouse or children, or you can, but that money's not going to cover them. Right. And then ROTC cadets are encouraged to apply. And midshipmen, there are proper channels to go through that of the approval that you should get. I know with cadets, that's a different thing than ROTC. I was not a cadet, so I can't speak to this personally, but I promise that UNG's Nationally Competitive Scholarship Office has lots of experience with cadets doing Boren, so they can help you with all that. And then also, if you happen to be a veteran, you're really encouraged to apply. Veterans have had a 57% acceptance rate from the 2022 to 2024 cycle. And that's because you make for a strong applicant because you can already prove in literal experience how you're interested in federal service. That makes sense. So if you're a veteran, that's just a nice little thing to note.
And if I can just jump in real quick on that
Yeah.
last slide, the student in question is a UNG student.
Can't you tell?
We are all over this.
Now that you say that, when I saw that picture, I was thinking that that building did look familiar. So there you go. It really is. All right. So let's get into what makes a good Boren. So the first kind of prism is this. And by the way, can y'all actually see this whole slide? Because I'm just now realizing that I'm like covering part of it. Okay, perfect. Um, the first prism of this is U.S. national security. So the Boren Awards focus on geographic areas, languages, and fields of study that are critical to U.S. national security. Now, that big term, according to Boren, is a very broad one and very flexible one that can be any policy issue related to U.S. security or foreign affairs. So this handy dandy list I have here that is not all of them, not extensive, but just to kind of get your gears flowing. National defense, diplomacy, sustainable development, scientific cooperation, environmental issues, global health and food security, population growth and migration, economic competitiveness. So all of those, you can make an argument for how they're connected to national security. It doesn't have to be that you can only be interested in, say, something to do with the military or security as far as arms go. There's a whole broad list of things that you could potentially make an argument for is connected to U.S. national security. And I point that out because I was a person that was interested in migration and refugees. So that is how I connected it back to U.S. national security. Um, so they recognize that broad definition, but it is up to you in your essays to connect the dots and make the argument explicitly stating it in your essays how it's connected to U.S. national security. It's not up to the essay readers to kind of draw those conclusions for you. Right. And the other big part of it is public service, because like I said, foreign awards alumni do have to commit to work for the U.S. federal government for at least a year. And there is preference, of course, given to those who are able to demonstrate that they have a long-term interest in a big career in the federal service. And then with that, also, there's kind of a balance between being dedicated to, I'm really interested in federal service, but then also having the flexibility to recognize that there's lots of different pathways that you could potentially take that would have you working in the policy issue area that you're interested in, that you say is important to national security, and recognizing in your application that all issues are somehow interagency. There's no issue that there's only one little tiny corner of the government that covers it. And kind of demonstrating that in your application will make you a really competitive applicant, showing that you know that there's lots of opportunities that you could take and kind of threshing those out in your essay, how you are going to be working in this national security issue that you're interested in. And then with that, if you start to do research and you're like, okay, well, in order to do what I'm planning to do here, I'm going to need to get a master's or a PhD, or that's kind of a part of my plan. That's okay. There are educational deferments of service available to awardees. I did it. Like I said, I did my Boren, I finished undergrad, and then I did my master's. So that's totally fine, and happens regularly. And then if you go to the borenawards.org right there, which will be referenced lots in this presentation, there's lots of resources on there, including where you can see where all different Borens have fulfilled their service across the government. So these are called priority agencies because any of these jobs and these four priority agencies will count towards your service requirement. So that's Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security, Department of State, and kind of with that USAID, and then the intelligence community, which is 18 different organizations, including Space Force. Or if you did a contract job paid, that's the important part, a contract job paid by any of these agencies, that may also fulfill the service requirement. And then here are some other agencies where people also do their service requirement. The thing with these agencies is you have to explain how it's connected to national security in order for your time there to be eligible to count towards your service requirement. But there are definitely, I can promise you, because I see the job listings for these places that are put out by Boren that you can do your service requirement with them. There are simply more jobs than you can imagine in these different agencies. So I really encourage you to check out those resources that are available to see what people have done, because you really just can't know what you don't know. Um, yeah, so with any of these agencies, the time that you spend there, you'll just report it to INSEP, which is kind of the government side that handles Boren, and then they'll determine whether or not, yes, it does count towards your service requirement or not. So I say all that, and let me also assure you that that part of Boren really, really intimidated me going in because number one, I was like, I don't really know what exactly I want to do. I'm writing all this in an essay, but like, I don't know. And it's really daunting when you're 19 years old and somebody's asking you to make a laid out plan of exactly how you're going to get this job to these people that want to potentially give you a lot of money to study the language that you want to study. That's all scary. And you do have to actually get the job yourself. Warren is not going to go out and get it for you. However, there are lots of resources available to you as a Boren awardee to help you get that job. There's the INSEP service team, which is people that it's their literal job to help you get the job. The resume consulting is at the bottom of this, but I'll mention it because it kind of goes in with the INSEP service team. Federal resumes are a beast of their own. The INSEP service team is there to help you figure all of that out. There's also exclusive job opportunities that just are for Boren alumni to apply for. And then also just future job opportunities that are for everybody that Boren is going to show you, hey, look at this. This is really cool. Straight to your email inbox, there's the Boren job board where even if you're not looking directly at those emails, you can look at the job board. There is a real person that is digging for those jobs and saying, hello, Boren people might like this. There's the federal employment seminar which happens in September in DC, where there's a job fair where I just went to this last one in this past September. It was really cool. There was agencies there hiring on site, so there's that. There's also the special hiring authorities, which is a very complicated thing that takes an HR professional to completely understand. But what you need to know is that it basically makes it easier for a agency, a federal office to hire you. It usually is very difficult, and I did not really appreciate that enough until I got into this job and met coworkers who had been trying to get a job with the federal government for years, that they might have been like contract staff or whatever. They've been trying to get a job at the passport agency and couldn't because they didn't have a special hiring authority that kind of helped them skip the line, basically, for lack of better words. Um, it's very difficult, and I didn't appreciate that enough until I got in, so it's awesome. Um, and then there's the INSEP Alumni Association, which I am not a part of officially. That's not the reason that I got the job that I have now, but it was through a fellow foreign alumni connection that I got the job that I have now. She's the one who told me, "Hey, come apply at this agency. I really like it." So yeah, those just the casual connections that you'll make with Boren will surely definitely help you in getting a job as well. So the other part of it is you have to be interested in learning a language, and about the culture where you're going. You're going abroad to study this language. You're also going to learn lots of other things besides just the language. Um, so when you are applying, you're going to have to also submit a plan of study. And with that plan of study, you have to show how language study is a core part of the ongoing element of whatever program you're proposing to get funding for. So as the numbers breakdown, that is minimum of 15 to 20 contact hours with the language per week. That can be whatever your program looks like. That can be in the classroom, with the host family, with language partners, tutoring, cultural tables, internships, whole variety of things. But you do have to show in your application how, in a tangible way, language learning is a core part of your program. And then also something to consider is that whatever program you're selecting should be appropriate to your level based on realistic goals for proficiency. So you can come in with any of these languages except except for French, which I'll talk about more. But with 99% of the languages, you can come in at any level. You can come in as a true beginner. You just want to make sure that you show that you're choosing a program that's appropriate for you, and that is going to get you to whatever your target goal is. And with that being said, I should note that Boren Awards are not just for language majors. I was not a language major. I ended up getting a minor just because I had enough credits for it, but I wasn't a language major. I was just also studying Arabic. And so you can come in, like I said, at any level. And then also Boren recognizes that a lot of the languages that you can study with Boren are not offered at many US institutions. So that's not going to be held against you if you want to study Wolof, and there's no Wolof program at UNG to my knowledge. I don't know. As far as I know. Okay, no. That's not going to be held against you that you didn't have a program to study that at North Georgia. So be creative. Let your mind wander what language you might be interested in studying. So that's kind of the broad criteria, what makes a good Boren good Boren. But there are two types of eligible programs. There's the self-identified program, which is what I did, and then there's the regional flagship language initiative, which is what Bailey did. And let's get into that a little bit. So with the self-identified program structure, basically it's you finding a program wherever you want to go, what the language that you want to study. And you might be thinking like, how in the world do I find a program? So there's plenty of resources at UNG. There's the study abroad office, and the connections that already exist with some languages, some programs that we've already sent people to, be it through a study abroad program outside of Boren, or Borens have gone there before. Also Google. I think I found my programs with Google, if I remember correctly. That's a great resource. And then also, like I said, with the BorenAwards.org, yet again, coming in clutch, you can go and see the different programs that people have done in the past. With both scholars and fellows, an internship is optional. I know for me, the programs that I chose just happened to have internships kind of worked into them. So that was great. They were just great programs. And then if you're a fellow and you are interested in doing research while you're there, by all means you can. It's optional. If you just want to go just for the language learning, that's also optional. So with the flagship language initiatives, it's basically, whereas the self-identified program, you are structuring everything yourself, you're budgeting the money, allocating it, arguing why it's a good program and how it's going to help you get from A to B. The flagship language initiatives offer some more built-in structure, and then also can be, depending on what you're comparing it to, more intense than some programs that you're going to find that you find yourself. So they all start with, they're available to all levels, first of all, except I'll mention the exception now for French, which you do have to come in with an intermediate high proficiency. Just a little caveat, but that's the only language that applies to. You basically start in the summer with a small program. It's intensive language study, and then they send you overseas in the fall where you do a local homestay, and you have the option of extending it in the spring, which I'll just mention that. Bailey, is there anything else you want to say on that? My only note is that that's available, but I'm not at all an expert on that. If you're interested in more about the spring extension, I don't know. I just know you can apply for it.
Yeah, so thanks for bringing that up, Madeline. So actually the spring extension, how it used to work previously was that we would reach out to you guys like in the middle of your like fall overseas program to say, hey, hope everything's going good. And we would kind of ask you if you were interested in extending into spring. What's changed about that this year is that we won't be doing that. And instead, we're asking you guys to apply up front for the spring extension. And this is just simply because we cannot guarantee funding will be available to everybody during like that normal time that we would reach out to you. So I know we're kind of asking you to look almost a year and some change into your schedules to kind of see what's feasible. But we're asking you to apply up front for that if that's something that you can do and would be of interest to you. But that's it.
Yeah, that's thinking way ahead, but I just wanted to make that clear. If anybody's interested with the flagship language initiatives and you're And you're thinking a year in advance, then there you go. So under the Flagship Languages Initiative umbrella, there's the African Flagship Languages, and this is where the French comes in. French is the only language that you can only study with the Flagship Languages Initiative. With any of these other languages that you see on these charts, you could theoretically do the self-identified program, if you don't want to have this already kind of like prepackaged wonderful structure, and you want to do it your own way, then you're more than welcome to apply with any of these languages in the self-identified program as well. So you can see with all these, you would spend the summer at the University of Florida, and then you would spend your fall overseas in whatever designated country is for that language. And then, like Bailey said, with the spring thing, if you're thinking about that, just make sure you mention it up front. And then there's the Southeast Asian Flagship Language Initiative. They do their summer at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And then the fall overseas programs are in Indonesia, Thailand, and Vietnam. Same with the spring thing. So here's a big, beautiful map. The green countries that you see here are the ones that Boren says, please, please, by all means apply. They're the ones that they're encouraging you to apply to. And then the blue ones are the ones where you can apply, but Boren does not anticipate being able to send students to those countries in 2024. So if you do apply to one of the blue ones, you have to explain what your plan B is in one of the green countries. And I have a note here that's very fun that Turkey is now green this year. It has not been in the past. So if you're interested in Turkish, by all means apply. I say that again as a little plug as somebody who lived in Turkey a little bit. If you are a language nerd, Turkish is a great language to study. It's very formulaic. And that's why I wasn't very good at it. But anyway, so you can apply to Turkey this year. And then also for any students that are applying with Arabic, Mandarin, or Russian, you do have to specify a viable alternative plan in another destination country that is where you're studying the same language. And it should be a green country. You shouldn't pick a plan B that is already one that needs a plan B. So let's say if you are applying to study Arabic in Jordan, that's a green country, but since you're doing Arabic, you still need to specify what your backup plan would be. And it's important to note that you should also do some research with whatever your backup program is. It should be comparable intensity as your plan A. So take it all in. I love looking at maps. So I'll give you another second with this one, actually. All right, so these are the language preferences, all the many different languages that Boren would love for you to study. And whenever possible, they should be studied in countries where they are spoken by a large proportion of the population, obviously. A note here, all African indigenous languages, there's too many to list every single one of them, but they're all languages that are encouraged for you to study. And then also you might notice that Latin America's list is very small. Haitian Creole and Portuguese are the only preferred languages. If you want to do Spanish, technically you can, or an indigenous language in Latin America, but you must articulate an especially strong national security argument and plan for federal service because, frankly, there's lots of different opportunities you could be taking advantage of to study Spanish abroad. Boren's not designed for that. But if you happen to just be really, really seriously passionate about a national security issue that has to do with Latin America, then I would say first consider the indigenous languages that you could study. If you don't want to do Haitian Creole or Portuguese, the indigenous languages will make for a stronger application because again, there's not as many opportunities to study an indigenous language in Latin America as there is Spanish. So consider that. But yeah, again, if you want to take a second to take in all these languages, most of them are not offered at North Georgia, so that's really cool that there's this avenue if you want to study one of these really niche languages, interested in it. All right, and then there's also the field of study preferences. So whatever is closest to your major, and it should be reasonably close, That is what your field of study would be. The STEM ones are in green, um, because green is the color of science. And those are the ones, like I said earlier, that are eligible for the summer program. So if you're interested in doing just the summer program and you're a STEM student, then that option is available to you. And you just have to select whatever field of study is actually closest to your major. So international affairs is actually on here, but like in my grad program, it was technically international relations, but I would choose international affairs. All right, so let's get into the nitty-gritty of what you actually have to submit to apply. So there's the essays, there's two essays that I'll get into more. There's letters of recommendation for scholars, they should submit two, they can submit three. And then for fellows, they have to submit three. And then a language proficiency evaluation is totally optional, but if you think that'll make your application stronger. Transcripts, study plan summary. The study plan summary is where you're going to break down the details of the program or programs that you're doing and kind of break down, like we said, with the contact hours, explicitly explain how language study is at the core of it. And then if you're a fellow and you're conducting research, then it's optional for you. You can submit your research abstract, your methodology, and then any affiliation letters that you have with the institutions that you'll be working with there. So, the essays, the brunt of the application process. So the first one is the national security argument, where you're going to describe the significance of your proposed overseas study to U.S. national security. So like I've been talking about, Boren Awards accepts a broad definition of national security, but it should be, whatever your argument is, it should be compatible with the professional goals and the career plan that you explain in essay number 2, where you're going to talk about your career plans. And also you should say in essay number 2 how you plan on retiring with the federal government and you're going to be it forever. And you have a long-term commitment, maybe not retire, but like I said, it should be about that you actually want to stay in the federal service. That will make a stronger application than saying that you're just going to do the 1 year that you have to do and get out. Not what you want to put in there. And I should note too that whatever you put in that second essay is not binding. I don't remember the exact positions that I mentioned in my essay at all. Nobody came to my house or my office and knocked on my cubicle and said, "Get out of here. You did never mention passports in your essay." That's fine. And like I said before, you also want to show in there that you know that there's lots of different avenues that you can go in the federal government, that's compatible with whatever national security issue that you're going to talk about in essay number 1. So it's an interesting balance to kind of think about between showing that you are dedicated to federal service, but also you're not so hardwired for just this one specific path, that you understand that whatever you're passionate about, whatever makes you interested in federal service, that there's lots of ways to accomplish that there's lots of opportunities, and you're so happy for the opportunity to work in the federal government. So something to think about if you are stressed about narrowing it down to one certain path. It's actually a strength if you can recognize that there's flexibility and that you're adaptable. So yeah, and there's again great resource on the Boren Awards website, borenawards.org/webinars. You can look for webinars about essays. Bailey, do you want to say anything else about that? I don't know exactly the details of any upcoming thing with essay webinars.
No, I think that's pretty much it. You covered it.
Okay. And also, let me reassure you that you are already at the University of North Georgia and you have a wonderful team of people to help you with these essays. I think that it's actually a great strength about going to a smaller school, the attention and care that you will get from the Nationally Competitive Scholarship Office that doesn't operate the same way as a huge university that has potentially dozens of people applying. I don't know. You are in great hands with the essays. Don't let those intimidate you. Just take it as a little bit of a spiritual experience, and you'll be fine. So deadlines, the Boren Fellows deadline is January 22nd, and then for scholars, it's January 29th. And these are the deadlines for programs that will begin after June 5th and before March 1st. And that part is kind of important because if you do get it, then you do have to go to the in-person convocation, May 29th and 30th in Washington, D.C. As correct me if I'm wrong, Bailey, but it's an expenses paid trip. It's not up to you to, yes, yes, okay.
Correct.
I wanted to make sure I was correct before I said that. But yeah, it is an expenses paid trip. It's a nice little time. You get to meet the other Borens. If you're like me, then you might meet somebody that you will be with the whole time you're abroad, and then who will then be the connection to your job in federal service. So who knows? It's a great thing, but you do have to go to that on May 29th and 30th. So, and then here is another breakdown of the timeline. So here we are in chatting about it. And then you have to submit by January 22nd or 29th. The notifications come out mid to late April, and then that mandatory convocation is May 29th to 30th. And your program could actually start anywhere between very shortly after that convocation or months after, just depending. Right, and then if you want to get in contact with Boren, there's their email there. Also, I learned when I was there recently preparing for this kind of stuff that you can really call Boren and they will help you with your essay. I didn't know that at all. Probably because I didn't feel like I needed more help than the great resources that I was getting from UNG, frankly. But it's good to know that if you're like, I don't know if this is a good argument to make, you can really call and be like, this is what I'm saying. Does that make sense? And they'll give you feedback. So that's really awesome. I'll also put my email in the chat actually, because it's not in this presentation, but that's all I have. And I love talking about my experience with Boren. Some things have changed from when I did it in the application process. But I was somebody that was really intimidated and nervous and scared to apply, and I don't know what my life would look like at all if I didn't. So I want everybody to apply, and I'm here to encourage you and tell you to do it if you need somebody to tell you to do it. So that's all I have.